Are you a first-timer trying to publish that first book? Maybe you're self-publishing, or maybe you're working with a traditional publisher. And in either case, you might be wondering, why is this process so expensive? Well, I agree, it is pretty expensive. And today I want to talk about why that is. I'm Dr. Amanda Nell Edgar, the managing editor and CEO of Page and Podium Press. And today I want to talk about the top 8 things you need to consider if you are self-publishing or traditionally publishing. And the last 2, by the way, might surprise you. I want to start by talking about the situation that prompts most authors of traditionally published books to question the expenses of publishing. And I know what you're thinking. If you haven't published before, you may think, if I have a traditional book deal, why do I ever have to think about the costs associated? And you might be right. You might not need to. But one thing that happens very often is that the book contract comes through. You're so delighted. Oh my gosh, it's so excited to see that in your email. You open up the contract, and when you get to the royalty section, you'll probably see something like 7.5% royalties on net. So that means you're not even getting 7.5% on the sales price of your book. You are getting 7.5% on the profits. That is not a very big number. And when you start seeing those, $19.99 or $24.99 books come across Amazon, you're going to be real excited, but there's usually a part of authors who wonder, why is my royalty so low? Well, in truth, it turns out that actually isn't such a low number by the time your editors take care of and consider all of the factors that have to go into producing that book. And that's what I want to talk about today. If you're a self-publishing author, this is going to be a really beneficial conversation because I'm going to list out all the things that you need to plan and budget for. And if you're a traditionally published author, you're going to see that there are some things, if you want them, you're going to have to pay for them yourself. Either way, you're going to leave this episode with a much better sense of the costs that go into publishing, whether you publish traditionally or DIY it. So let's start by thinking about how traditional publishers approach a book that they want to acquire. This is useful if you're trying to get a traditional deal, and it's also useful if you're self-publishing because it's going to show you how the pros think about the dollars and cents. So anytime an acquisitions editor, sometimes called an acquiring editor, anytime they find a book that they want to publish, they have to jump through as many hoops as you feel like you do, I promise. They're going to have to take it to their managing editor. They're going to have to take it sometimes to their editorial board. They're going to have to take it to marketing. They are going to have to get approval, essentially, by other people to have another perspective on whether that book's going to sell. What they have to prepare to make sure that that conversation goes well is called a P&L. Business people, you'll know what this is, a profit and loss statement. This is one of the most common documents if you run a small business that you'll have to prepare if you want a loan, if you are trying to, even if you're trying to get a mortgage and you're a small business owner, you a lot of times will have to give your P&L so that the bank can look and see and make sure they're making a good investment. That is exactly the purpose that a P&L in publishing serves as well. It is a document that in dollars and cents demonstrates whether that book is going to be a good investment. In other words, whether it's going to make the press enough money to keep their overhead going, to stay in business. So I want to start by looking at a sample P&L statement, and I just prepared this. This is not an actual P&L of anybody's book, but I thought it would be useful to look at an example. So if you are watching on video, I'm going to share this on the screen. If you are listening on audio, I will describe it as well as I can, but I'll also put a link in the show notes. So when we talk about a P&L, you are going to see at the top of that P&L statement, you've got all your just general title data, the title, author, the price that your editor is suggesting you should list the book at. That usually, by the way, is going to be in line with what we call comps, comparative or competing titles. We're going to look at what is the market willing to pay for a book in that genre by that level of author. in that format, paperback, ebook, or hardcover, or audiobook, although that's usually a different set of rights down the line. Your trim size, that's just the size of your book, dimensions of your book, and also the pages. Now, you will hear this all the time. Your pages, your page count's going to make a really big difference in what your book costs to produce. That is why your editor is going to keep you to a upper limit word count. It's why you're not going to be able to, if you're publishing traditionally, include maybe as many or any photographs or tables, charts, that kind of thing. If you publish traditionally and you want those things, you may be asked to pay for them. Your page count makes a huge, huge difference. A book is a product. More pages is more cost, and the price of paper has gone way up since the pandemic. So below that, you're going to see your author royalty. So that's usually going to be a different royalty rate for print versus ebook. For print, I put 7.5%. That's really, really standard. If it is ebook, that varies a lot more wildly. That might be 25%, it might be 10%. Usually it's going to be somewhere between those two numbers. Now here is where we get into the stuff that can be really useful to remember. You've got your title costs. That's going to include any kind of editorial. So they're going to hire out probably the copy editing. That's usually going these days to freelancers. The proofing, that's usually going to go to a freelancer. You've got your art and photography cost. So that is your cover design. And if you are using any kind of art that needs to be licensed, that is going to have a cost associated with it as well. There is going to be a marketing budget. I'm going to talk about what that means a little bit later, by the way. It doesn't mean what you think it means. Then you're going to have your manufacturing costs. So that is for your first initial print run. What is the pricing going to be? Now, depending on the size of the print run they want to do, the price per book is going to change. So you can see anything to $5 per book for a very, very small print run, to usually like $2 for a larger, more standard print run, 1,000 or more copies. So that's going to be your manufacturing. They've got to then, of course, figure in the price to ship those books. You've got distribution costs. All of that stuff is packed in there. And then, of course, there's press overhead. The more things that are being done in-house by that press, the more they're going to have to pay their staff. The editor you're working with, the editor who is fighting for your book, they've got to be paid, right? There's got to be, in many cases for traditional publishers, there's an actual house. It is an on-ground business, right? So they have got to pay to keep the lights on. They've got to pay for air conditioning. They've got to pay for all of the overhead costs that any business has to pay for. Then, on the other hand, you're going to start to see at the bottom of this sheet, you're going to see things like the sales quantity that they're expecting purchased. So what are they expecting from bookstores? What are they expecting from specialty stores? What are they expecting in the DTC, the direct to consumer segment, Amazon, for example? And then are they expecting any bulk orders? So are they going to do any kind of partnership? Which, if you're a self-published author, my number one tip, see if you can get a partner organization to buy your book in bulk. All that is going to add up here. In the bottom, then, they're going to run all those figures, and all they're looking for is there going to be a profit? Are all those expenses going to be offset by the number of book sales? And unfortunately, this is what it comes down to. Your book is going to be picked up or not based on whether the price to produce it is lower than the anticipated sales numbers. It's dollars and cents. I know that can be so heartbreaking. If you are a heart-centered, a soul-centered author and you're trying to get your story out there, it is really hard to think of it in terms of dollars and cents. But that's what presses are doing, and there's a really good reason. That's what I want to talk about in the rest of this video. Let me give you the top 8 considerations and how you can think of those, either if you're working with a traditional publisher or if you're self-publishing. So first of all, let's talk about the beginning of your journey. If you are publishing traditionally, you are probably going to have to cover this one. And if you're self-publishing, I highly recommend you add it on. You should think about whether you want a book coach or a developmental editor before you ever submit. One of the things that goes into a traditional press looking to see whether you're going to have a sales return on their investment is how good of a quality your book is. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not saying if the book is well written, it will sell. That's not true. There are lots of other considerations in whether they think a book's going to sell. Things like, is there an established platform? We've got a video on that we released last week. Is there an established market? So is that market really hot at the moment or in a year when your book comes out? Or is this a kind of newer topic and there's not an established marketplace for selling it? Is this going to be a known author? They're going to think about that. Are bookstores, for example, going to know this author and say, we got to put this on a display? They're going to think about kind of all these different factors that go in. But one of them really is the quality of the writing. Remember how we tallied up the freelancer and the staff costs? If you need a lot of editing work, that's going to skyrocket those costs. The press is not going to be able to cover that for you. So I highly recommend that you seek out some support from an industry insider before you ever think about submitting. You're going to make that so much easier on yourself. Now, to give some sense of range, if you're looking for just a book coach, somebody that's going to look over your work, give you feedback, give you tips, kind of help you figure out how to navigate, you should really expect to pay $1,000 to $1,500 per month. And in my experience, it's usually around 6 months is the minimum to really see results. So make sure that you're thinking about that investment. You can definitely find more affordable book coaches and you can find much more expensive book coaches. But just keep in mind that is a person whose expertise you're paying for. So you want to expect that price to be around $1,000 to $1,500 a month. The second thing you need to think about is copy editing and proofreading. Now, keep in mind, here is a place where the traditional press is not going to skimp. Remember, we listed the freelancers in our P&L. When we talk about freelancers, that is primarily going to be your copy editor. That's the number one biggest freelance expense when it comes to the manuscript itself. A good copy editor is magical, truly. We have folks on our staff that I know they can polish up any book they put their mind to. But I'll tell you what, they're going to charge me if it needs a lot of help, right? So you want to think about your copy editor as someone who it is worth paying the money for, but you want to make sure that that book is as good as it can be before you send it to them. They're going to tighten up your language at the line level. They're going to point out any inconsistencies. They're going to talk to you about structure. And if you get a good copy editor, they're even going to fact check for you. They're going to point things out that you missed, that you didn't think about. And I have seen this over and over and over with excellent copy editors who have worked on my books, who have worked on the books for my press. You want a good copy editor. They are worth their weight in gold. After it's been copy edited, we're still going to want to proofread it. That's going to be a second person because we want someone not familiar. We might call that a cold eye proofreader, because they're going to go through and make sure that the copy editor didn't introduce any minor typos or spelling errors, things like that. I know that seems like that shouldn't be the case. It's very, very common. When copy editors are working in your manuscript, there might be things that slip through the cracks just because they're looking at a little bit more zoomed out. A proofreader is going to go word by word, really make sure that there are no errors in the grammar, syntax, spelling, or other punctuation, other typos. The third thing that you need to consider, this is the very most fun part, is your design. Now, I listed the artwork when we were talking about the P&L. You might not have artwork, but if you do want any kind of art that you're going to repurpose into your cover, remember you're going to have to get licensing for that. But you've also got to hire your cover designer. Now, most presses, us included, have staff cover designers and staff interior layout designers. If you're self-publishing, you're going to have to cover that. So we might, if you're going to freelance source that out, I would plan on probably $2,000 or $3,000 for your cover design. If you've got art, that varies hugely. But make sure if you want, a high demand artist, you're going to have to budget in probably the thousands of dollars. You may be able to partner with a newer artist if you really love their work, if you are consistently promoting them as you talk about your book. Mileage may vary on that, but be sure that you plan for hiring out that cover designer. The press will provide them as part of that overhead, but if you are going it alone, you're going to need to hire them. Your interior design, that has gotten so much easier. It used to be that you had to know very specific layout programs to be able to serve this role. Now there are very simple programs that will do it for you. I highly recommend for self-publishing authors the program called Vellum, Vellum. Vellum is an excellent program. It is so easy to use. It will incorporate everything from your Word document, lay it out into its interface. You can play around with the style. Oh, it's so fun. But if you want somebody to do that who's a professional, you're going to need to pay them to do that. If you just decide to buy Vellum and go it alone, I think it's $250 one-time fee to use it. You can use it as many times as you like, but make sure that you're budgeting for that. You do not want to skip on your layout. I promise. I've seen so many self-published books where you open it up and it's self-published because it looks like a Word document, right? So you want to make sure you've got your interior design also locked down. Okay, the fourth element I find the most overlooked is your registration. So if you ever, if you were in college and you remember searching for a cheaper version of the textbook that the bookstore had, you probably came into contact with an ISBN. An ISBN is just your book's registration number. Every book format has to have its own. And essentially, you just are purchasing this through a company called Bowker, Bowker. You will set up your account through Bowker if you're a self-publishing author. You need to purchase a separate ISBN for each format. So if you're doing an ebook, a paperback, and a hardback, you need a separate number for each of those formats. If you're working with the press, they have probably bought a package of ISBNs that they can just assign to your book, but it's not free. So they're going to have to pay for that registration fee. Now, if you're self-publishing, I want to extend a word of caution. I highly recommend that you purchase that registration directly through Bowker and not through KDP. KDP, and I believe Ingram Spark as well, have available ISBNs for you that you can buy, but those are under their publishing imprint. If you buy through Bowker, you can set your imprint up, the name of your publisher essentially, any way you'd like. It's going to be much more professional result for you. The fifth thing you need to think about is the printing costs. So traditional publishing, we went over that on your P&L that I showed you earlier. When you're bulk ordering books, your press is going to order an initial print run. They're going to pay for however many books that is, and then they're going to store them in their warehouse. If you are a self-published author, you're probably going to use POD or print on demand. This is what you get through KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, where they are just one-off printing each individual book that someone buys on Amazon. They print it right then and ship it to them. That is a more expensive process than a single book that is bought in bulk, but buying in bulk, of course, means you have to pay for all the copies and you got to store them somewhere. So the traditional press, they've got a warehouse where they can house your books. They've got a distribution system so that they can get those out to the individual consumers or the bulk order partners. But you have to pay for that. That's part of what is coming out of your book sales before you can get your royalties. If you're a self-published author, you've got to pay for it out of your own pocket. The next issue is distribution. Again, you can use Ingram Spark or Kindle Direct Publishing. They will do the distribution for you, but traditional publishers have to have somebody on deck to handle incoming orders and outgoing shipments. Number 6 is marketing. And I will tell you, this is hands down the area in which traditionally published authors are the most disappointed. The disappointment comes in because a lot of authors confuse marketing with promotion. And promotion is the part where the author gets to be the star. It's where you see on Hollywood movies, you see this big press-funded book tour and you are jet setting around the nation, maybe around the world, talking about your book on the press's dime. This is really, really, really uncommon. Really uncommon. For most authors, the kinds of expenses that would be associated with a press-sponsored book tour would necessitate such huge sales numbers, it's just not realistic. Now, is promotion a good idea? 100%. And I will tell you, no press will balk at you deciding to do your own promotion. In fact, most presses are going to want to see in your book proposal that you plan to do that, or they're not going to sign a contract in the very first place. So when we talk about promotion, what are we talking about? We're talking about not only things that cost a lot of money, like a big book tour, but also things that you can do relatively simply on your own. If you missed last week's video on building a platform, that's a great resource to think about some of the very simple ways that you can engage in promotion even before your book is out, even before your book is completely written. But all of those are going to be your own expense, whether you self-publish or traditionally publish, just because presses cannot afford to pay for that kind of thing in today's economy. It's just not a thing. It hasn't been for many, many years. We shake our fist at the Hollywood video machine for telling authors that they're going to get these promotion opportunities paid for by the press. And then the last thing that I want to make sure we talk about, and this is less an expense than just something to think about as you're trying to wrap your head around how all the dollars and cents of publishing work. That's returns. So I know almost every author I talk to, really, they want their book in physical bookstores. I will tell you, this is not as great of a boost to your sales as it once was, just because lots of folks don't shop in bookstores anymore. A lot of folks just use their phone, go to Amazon, order the book, call it good. But there is something so magical about going to a bookstore and seeing your title on the shelf. We try to do this for all of our authors, is get placement in at least a local bookstore so that the author can send their friends, their church group, all kinds of folks to go and buy that book at the bookstore. It's an excellent signal of good faith with the bookstore. They're making some profit off of that. They're going to be much more amenable if you can bring them good sales to doing different promotional campaigns with you, working with you on, say, a launch party or a book signing. But the thing about bookstores is bookstores will rarely, if ever, buy your book unless you give them a wholesale price, usually 55%, and allow returns. This is such a bummer because I know we all want to believe that our books are going to just sell like hotcakes. In truth, a lot of books end up just sitting on bookstore shelves. Well, unlike Amazon, that is every book that's registered with the Library of Congress is in Amazon, whether the author listed it there or not. Unlike Amazon, bookstores do not have unlimited space to carry inventory. They need to know that the books they order are either going to sell or they're going to be able to get their money back for them. And that's why we have returns on our list of profit and loss. There's always going to be some returns. And I mention this because as an author, if you're a traditionally published author, you're going to get that royalty statement usually once a year. It depends on your press, but usually once a year, every 6 months. And you are going to see returns on there. That does not mean that an individual reader didn't like your book. could, I guess, but more often with traditional book sales, those returns are bookstores that stocked, they believed in your book, they hoped it was going to sell, they stocked it. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't sell, they've got to get it off their shelves. They've got to make room for new stuff. So that's where the returns are going to come in, and returns are going to be subtracted out, of course, of the royalties you earn, because those sales didn't actually happen. Once they're returned, the press doesn't get that money, so you don't either. So make sure that you're thinking of returns if you're traditionally publishing. If you're a self-published author and you want your books in bookstores, you're going to need to account for returns as well. When you register your book on Ingram Spark, which is really the only route other than just calling that you're going to have to get your book in a bookstore, you'll see they'll ask you for your wholesale terms. I would highly recommend, their recommendation is correct, that 55% discount and the returns available really is your only shot at getting into a bookstore. So when we add all this up, it can be a little bit of a bummer. My apologies. I know we all want to really feel like our book was really successful. This is another reason that I really urge every author, first time or repeat, to have a really clear goal in mind of why you're writing that book. We all want excellent sales figures. It means that our book is getting into people's hands. And of course, after we've spent all this money getting our cover design and our art licensed and our freelance editors and copy editors and all of this expense, we do want to get a return on that investment, right? But the truth is, books just do not make money unless you have all of the things in place. You've got your platform, you've got your promotional campaign, you are reaching out to the readers that you want to engage and making sure they feel like they're in relationship with you. If you don't have all those pieces in place, you're not likely to get a huge return on your investment. However, if you have other types of goals, things that are really going to feed your soul, you will get a return on that every time. If you have people you want your book to help, you genuinely need to share your story because you want to lift up people that are like you were once, or you want to give tips and tricks to this group of people that are getting bogged down in whatever issue it is that you're an expert on. You will see a return on that investment. You are going to get the return of people bringing their gratitude to you, commenting at how surprised they were to learn this and that and the other thing you've included in your book. You're going to get people that rejoined their church, for example. We had an author who published his book. He was so shocked to see that people who were not churchgoers read the book and decided to seek out a congregation. You're going to get people who decide to change their careers. If you're writing a business or leadership book, you might convince someone that they're in the wrong line of work. You have changed someone's life. It's really hard to put dollars and cents to that, and I don't think we should. So, as you're thinking about all the factors that make publishing so expensive, I know it can be really frustrating to think about the costs that are associated. But trust me, if you can find a way to make it work, either through crowdfunding, through getting organizational sponsorship, or yes, digging into your own pocket, I promise, if you have your motives in the right place, if you have the goals in place for who you want to help, you are going to be rewarded every single time. If you have enjoyed this video, I hope you'll like and subscribe. We are finishing up our publishing series with one more video next week. You are not going to want to miss this. So please make sure that you like and subscribe, and I will look forward to seeing you all next week. Happy writing!